All righty, James Keddington here with Better Me Nation, and today I have got Eli Adams with me, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with Eli. A few months ago, actually, I learned that he and his wife had written a book about mental health, and it wasn't just your typical book about mental health. It was specifically for children to give parents the opportunities to talk about this important topic with their children, but in a way that's appropriate. And I learned about this shortly after one of my first podcast episodes where me and my own children talked about mental health. Now, my children, two of them are grown adults, married, moved out of the house. So different than what Eli has done because his children's younger. And so I thought, wow, this is because this is really going to allow us to talk about this important issue, but with a younger age group. So, Eli, welcome. Thank you for
Thank you.
coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, your book's name is Lucy Tames Her Tiger.
That's right.
And that sounds so inviting for a myriad of reasons, right?
Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about your situation, like that how you and your wife got to the point where you felt like you should write a book, and what's going on in your own family that spurred this.
Yeah. So it's kind of a long story, so I'll try to make it quick for you. But basically, my oldest daughter, her name is Lucy, and she had an incident at school in second grade that made her how do I say it? She has a lot of PTSD about going to school because she's afraid this thing will happen again. And anyway, so that was the beginning, and I know that doesn't sound very dramatic. Everyone's like, "Oh, everybody has problems at school," but it was a very dramatic thing for her, and it turned into many years of fighting to get her to go to school. Where it started out where we'd bribe her and convince her, "Hey, you can have some candy when you get home if you go," and it worked a little bit, and then it just got harder and harder and harder and harder, and it became more of a really big anxiety issue because of this one thing that happened at school. Well, at least that's what we thought in the beginning. It turns out there was a lot more that was going into it than just that thing that happened at school. But basically, it turned into us picking her up, getting her dressed, picking her up, taking her to school, kicking and screaming, handing her off to the vice principal or somebody else at the school. They would grab her, take her inside, and we would take off. And they would call us later and say, she's fine, she's in class, everything's great. And then it got worse, and she realized the older she got, she realized that, well, I just have to avoid getting ready for school. And so then I would forcefully get her ready for school, do the same thing, take her in. And this happened for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden, I say years and years, but really it was like 2 years. All of a sudden she realized, well, if I don't get dressed and I fight for it, then you can't do anything. So she ended up just going in the corner in the bathroom and pretty much just sat there naked and cried the whole day. And she's like, I'm not ever going again. You can't make me. And it turned into something a lot bigger than just, anxiety over this one thing. Right. And so over the years we had, it grew. We started to get it under control, and then something would happen, this anxiety. And then we finally felt like we had it taken care of right before COVID. And then COVID happened and ruined everything again. And so,
Man.
COVID was really, really, really rough for her. Specifically going back, she was okay doing the homeschool and all that, but then going back after she'd been out for close to a year, she wasn't having it. So long story short, we decided to put her in online school, and she's been doing that ever since. But we had about a 2-year period when she was about 9 years old where everything scared her. Everything was a what if. Everything was, I can't leave the house because what if it burns down? Or what if it burns down and my toys are inside? I can't go to grandma's house because what if there's an earthquake and we're not at home where I know where my stuff is? What if, all sorts of things. And it became, have you seen the movie What About Bob?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's OCD, not necessarily like anxiety, but it was very similar where he did not
Right.
want the house unless he did certain things. And it got to the point where she wasn't even leaving the house to go to see, grandma down the street, which we've gone to grandma's house once a week or more for her whole entire life. And there was about a 6-month period where she just sat in her room and cried. And we had fits, and she would kick and scream and hit me, and over the littlest things. And so it was a tough kind of 6 months. There was a 2-year period where my wife and I looked into podcasts and parenting books, and we paid for classes, and we we did everything we possibly could to figure out how we could help our daughter. And we finally found a few things, and we started to see light at the end of the tunnel. And about a year ago, we said, how can we help other parents get through this without going through the 3 or 4 years of tears, the 3 or 4 years of just real big struggle? And we came to the conclusion that the best way to get our message out was through a book. And I'm not a good enough writer to write a really good parenting book, and those didn't really help me either. Like, they were good books, and they gave me some good tips, but it didn't solve the problem. What it came down to was what Lucy needed, not what I needed or what my wife needed. It was what did Lucy need? And so we decided to write a kid's book that would help other kids in the same situation as Lucy understand what they're going through, and certain exercises on how to overcome what they're going through, and also to help friends of people with anxiety. And it also has exercises that the parents can look at in more detail in the back of the book, specifically going through. So in the book, it goes through the exercises, and in the back of the book, we have this parenting section that has the 3 exercises laid out for them that says, when your kids get in this situation, here's an exercise you can try. And so, kind of long story short, there's a lot of details in there that we can talk about in this podcast about that. But that's kind of how we got to the book idea. This is how we need to spread the word and really help other parents. If I can cut down 2 years of crying every night, thinking you're a horrible parent, to 1 year or 6 months because you have a few extra exercises, it would be worth it for us to take the time and write this book and get it out there for those other parents that are struggling and the other kids that are struggling. Because it was a really tough time and a really dark time in our lives to see our daughter go through this and not knowing what to do. Many nights
Yeah,
of tears. So
I bet. Yeah, it seems to me like you not knowing how to react added more issues
yeah,
and created some for you and your wife,
absolutely. Well, I mean,
right?
as parents, we really only know what we were taught, right? As parents, as
Which is
our
almost
parents taught
nothing.
us,
Which is almost nothing.
right? And so I was taking the tactics that my parents took, and my wife was taking the tactics that her parents took, but none of our parents ever had a kid go through anxiety like we did. And so they were wrong for Lucy. Those tactics, although they were good parenting for us, it worked for
Mhm.
us. It wasn't the right approach for Lucy.
Well, some of it worked for us. I think some
Oh,
of my
yeah.
issues are directly related to my parents, but
Yeah, but
um,
what kid gets out of childhood
right,
without having some kind of parenthood drama?
right, right. No, it's that's absolutely true, and the so just knowing how to talk to our kids too, because just the idea of, I'm sure that your response was probably a little bit maybe more on the masculine side of like, we're just gonna like stop and we're gonna like, this is the end of it. I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe am I wrong? And
No,
your wife is
100%.
probably the extreme opposite, like cuddle it, comfort it, and both of those aren't healthy for
Yep.
addressing anything, right? And so, yeah, if you can save parents developing their own mental health issues, save the compounding effect of additional ones on a child,
Yeah.
I mean, this book could probably save thousands of dollars in therapy.
Yeah. Yep. We tried therapy. We tried medication. We tried all of that. I mean, there was one time where we actually ended up in the ER. It got so dark that we took her to the ER, and it was tough. So, looking back, I'm getting a little emotional thinking about what we went through to get to where we're at, and we're not out of it. She still has anxiety, but she has
Right.
tools. And she's in a different stage in life where it's manageable, and we can help her, and she can help herself. And but there were some very dark times, and we didn't know what to do.
So I don't want to ruin the story of the book, but give us like an overview. What what is Lucy Tame? I know it's a tiger,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
what's the premise of the book? And
Okay. So the
no spoilers, please.
I'll try not to spoil it. So the idea is that Lucy has this imaginary tiger. Nobody else can see this tiger but Lucy.
Okay.
And when her anxiety is calm, it's a cute little cub that'll, get up on her lap and be just fine. And as the anxiety grows, the tiger starts to grow into this like teenage looking tiger. And then when it's out of control, it just gets up in her face. And a lot of times that's how anxiety worked for her. Like it didn't matter what we said. It didn't matter if it was a bribe, if it was a calm, if it was anger, like it didn't matter what it was. When she had that anxiety, it was almost like this tiger was in between me and her, and it was yelling at her in her face, so she couldn't understand anything we were saying. And so the book kind of portrays that, where as the anxiety gets bigger, the tiger distracts her and gets in front of her and growls, and she goes through this sort of transition where she's like, well, I remember my mom said to do this exercise when this happens. And so she does it, and it starts to shrink the tiger and becomes manageable so she can go throughout the day. And it's not always that simple. We made it that simple in the book, but it's not like you do an exercise and you're fixed. That's just
Right.
not how it
Right.
works. But
Yeah.
the premise in the book is that she goes through multiple different scenarios where the anxiety gets triggered, and she has different tools and tactics to manage that tiger and get it back down to something small. And the reason it's an imaginary tiger is because nobody sees anxiety. You can't look at somebody and say that person has anxiety, right? And it's the
Right.
same with the imaginary tiger. Lucy's the only one that can see and feel and internalize what's going on with the tiger and her anxiety. That's kind of the premise of the book.
I love that analogy because it's true. When you're faced with something, it could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be addiction, it could be anything. It's so big. I mean, if there really was a real tiger in front of you, and your dad is yelling, "Run, run!" You're still thinking, like, I don't even know what you're
What do
saying
I
because
do?
they're
Yeah.
trying to run. You
Yep.
still don't even hear the advice that you're trying to implement. And if your mom's trying to cuddle you, you're just like, "What are you talking about?" Like, I
Yeah.
got this monster that is in front of me. Like, it's not going to be okay. It's not like, don't tell me it's going to be okay. This is right.
Yeah.
I love this analogy of how it grows too, because things like that will just ruminate, but when they grow, it kind of like slowly, 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 and then boom, it just pops.
Yeah. And
Right.
a lot of times from like a scientific or biological standpoint, whatever you want to call it, the reason that she didn't want to hear us or couldn't hear us or whatever when she was having these panic attacks was because she wasn't getting enough oxygen to her brain, and she wasn't breathing like she should, because when you're scared you have shallow breathing and stuff like that. And
Right.
so
Right.
so she really could not like compute what we were saying. And so one of the first exercises that we talked through was breathing, a breathing exercise, and that helped. So it didn't fix the problem, but it helps get to a point where she can actually understand what we're talking about. And um, it's not always easy to get her to do the breathing either. But just so parents know, like, yeah, you can pretend there's an imaginary tiger, but really what's going on is her brain is just not working the way it's supposed to or the way it normally does. So the first big exercise that you can do as parents is help them breathe. And the exercise in the book is called square breathing, where you breathe and you count to like, yeah, you make a square in your mind. And so you breathe and you count to 3 or 4, and then you let it out and you count to 3 or 4, and you breathe and you count to 3 or 4. And so it creates this square. So visually they're distracted thinking of a square, and they're breathing, which is fixing the oxygen in their brain. And it really does change and transform her ability to understand what she can do next to fix the situation she's in.
So when you're reading this book, I'm assuming this is not a one-time read. I'm
Yeah,
assuming probably
yeah,
the initial time you read is like, hey, let's read this fun story.
yeah,
And you sit down, it's like, wow, that's a story. And then you can say, when you get scared of going to school, does it feel like a tiger?
yep,
Yeah. Oh, well, what did Lucy do?
yeah,
Right? Oh, she
yep.
took a breath and so I imagine you come back to the story a lot, and it becomes very much a guide in the evolution of addressing anxiety and whatever other issues are going on.
And that was the hope for the parents too. And I actually was confirmed this last weekend. We saw some cousins and they were talking about how much they like the book. And they say it's actually practical where they use it in the exact scenario that you just said. That when the kid starts to throw a fit or get out of control or become scared, they say, well, what did Lucy do when she faced that situation in the book? And so that was the hope, is that the parents would take those exercises, remind the kids of the book they like so much, and then visualize this tiger shrinking. And it seems to be, for some of our readers, that is working.
This kind of reminds me of, like, when adults do child trauma therapy,
Hmm.
oftentimes they'll go back and say, what would you tell your 7-year-old self, right? Or 16-year-old self, right? This almost seems like the reverse of that, where you, through the story, you give the child uh, a visualization of what can be,
Hmm.
that's connected to what they're feeling. And instead of going back and saying, what would you tell your child? You're saying, what did Lucy do? Or what did Johnny do? Right. And it gives them a chance to project into the future the type of responses they want to have,
Yeah.
versus us going in reverse. What should we, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that. It's almost like a vision board idea, where it's like, and also the idea where you decide ahead of time how you'll respond. Like, like the anti-drug campaigns, like, choose now to say no to drugs when you go
Yeah.
to a party, right? It's the same type of
Yeah.
thing. Like, hey, you've
Yeah.
already chosen to take a deep breath. Let's take a deep breath. Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
remember I
So
chose that, right?
So we looked into that quite a bit. In fact, the DARE program, the drug program, was something that I've used as examples when talking about this in the past too. So they tell you in the DARE program, and I'm not sure if it's still called the DARE program, but growing up it was just say no to drugs, and you would practice say no, say no, say no. So when the time
Yep.
came
Yep.
and you had that adrenaline spike, you just said no. So what happens a lot of times with the anxiety is there is an adrenaline spike, and the reason that works is because when you make a decision, your frontal lobe is what makes that decision for you, right?
Yep.
But your memories are back here. And so what happens is, if you say it enough and you visualize it, it moves back here. So the problem with adrenaline is it floods your adrenal, or your frontal lobe, which is your decision making part of your brain.
It
And if you
inflames it
don't
and
Yeah, and
inhibits your ability to. Yeah.
if you don't have that protocol stuck in the back of your head, you can't make that decision, right? So you think about, if you've ever seen an accident and you get out and somebody's kind of in shock, and they can't, like, talk, they can't make decisions. That's because their frontal lobe is filled with that adrenaline. So I talked to Lucy and my other kids about, let's practice when we're calm. Let's practice, if this happens, what do we do, right? And then, so that hopefully we can get that back here, so when they have that scenario pop up where they have lots of adrenaline, then, like, for example, big crowds, they don't work for a lot of my kids. We get into these scenarios where there's, huge crowds. We go to a market or some, family reunion where there's tons of people. It's very easy for them to, fall off the ledge and just throw a fit and not be able to make any decision. And it kind of ruins that experience for us. And so we've been practicing, okay, if we go into a big crowd and you're scared, what do we do to calm down? And we work on that breathing exercise, and we work on some of those things, so that when we go in the big crowd next time, we say, remember we practiced this. So what do? We do that breathing. So it is good to, like, pre-program your brain and help your kids see that future vision of what they're going to do when that scenario comes. And it does help a lot. And there, it depends on how old your kids are. Sometimes it's a concept that they can't really grasp, but the older they get, the easier it gets for them to sort of visualize if I see this problem coming, here's what I'm going to do. And I know that because I practiced it.
I love this so much. I remember, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, anybody can imagine this, right? We've seen the videos on YouTube, the kid that drops down in the grocery store, throws a fit, tosses all
Yeah.
the boxes of cereal, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And until we really know about this, bystanders look and they're like, your kid's a brat. Someone needs a
Yep.
beating. Someone needs it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you may have even thought that before too. I don't know, maybe not. But then you're like, wait, no, like I give my kids a good life. We discipline them. They do their chores. They put their clothes away. They do this. Why did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
But now, like when you start talking about this and you say, and other parents can hear, oh, there's something that's not clicking. And it's not that they want to look like a brat or look spoiled or
Sure.
look undisciplined. Something's shutting them down
Yep.
and they don't know how to respond to that.
And
And so
it's
they're,
part
and
of the learning process as a kid. Like you have to go
yeah,
through some of that to realize what you did was not the right decision, right?
right. But the deciding ahead of time, though, because if you
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to respond, it's no different than a parent on the sidelines of a sporting event who doesn't know how to respond to not knowing the rules of a game. So they just yell.
Yeah.
It's the same thing,
Yep.
right? Parents don't understand the games. They don't understand what refs are looking for. They don't even know what the refs are looking at. So they just yell.
Yeah.
But if they
Yeah. So
understood that, it would change. And
so
same with kids, right?
this is a good segue into sort of a perspective change that I think a lot of parents need to have
Cool.
when you're at the store or you're at the sporting event and your kid's doing whatever. Let's use the store example. So your kid's throwing a fit. The reason you're upset is not because the kid's throwing a fit. The reason is because you're embarrassed because it's making you
Right.
look bad, right?
Right. Yep.
And so the approach that I realized I was taking in the beginning was, how can I change Lucy so that I don't feel this way? What can I do to make Lucy better so that I don't feel this way? And I had a conversation with one of my older brothers, and he had gone through a similar experience with his daughter. And I talked to him. I was like, in tears, like, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, how do we help her? What did you do to help your daughter? And he changed this for me. So he said think about the future. Think about Lucy 15 years from now. Do you want her to remember an angry dad yelling at her saying, you need to change, this is how you need to change? Or do you want her to remember you're the loving dad that went to her and said, how can I help you? What can I do to make things better for you? And that perspective changed in my mind, where it wasn't anymore, how can I make you better so I don't look this way? So I don't feel like I'm failing as a parent. And it changed the perspective to say, what does Lucy need? What's going on with Lucy and how can I help her? And as soon as we sort of changed the way we were thinking and not caring about how we would look, we really started to do things differently with Lucy. So instead of, typical yelling and go to your room and don't throw a fit because I'm the parent and that's just how it's going to be, we would
Yep.
sit down and we would talk through it and say, what happened today? What scenario happened during the day that triggered it? And then let's talk about why that happened, what we can do better in the future if that happens again. And we sort of went through that process. But it is a perspective change that parents need to have. And instead of saying, how do I fix you so you don't make me look bad as a parent? We need to change that and say, what do you actually need? How can I help you feel better? Not the other way around.
So it seems like there's like this decide ahead of time. There's the implementation slash failure.
Hmm.
And then there's the post mortem,
Yep.
like evaluation, right? And it
Yeah.
feels like that happens with the parent needs to do that. And the parent needs to do that with the child.
Yep.
It's a two-stage thing, right?
Yep.
So let's kind of can we role play? Can I be Lucy?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think it'd be cool to
This
have
is
people hear like what does this actually look like? Because we're talking about this right now,
Mhm.
but we're grown adults
Yeah.
using grown adult verbiage and language and body language. I'm really
Yeah.
good at being childish.
I actually, before we jump into that, I actually recorded the majority of the tantrums that she had, and I just put the phone down so you could hear it. And a lot of times the purpose of me doing that was so that I could go to the doctor or the therapist and say, what could we have done better? This is what she did. What could we have done better? And at
That's
some point, maybe when
brilliant.
she's older, maybe we'll release some of those. And if she wants to help other kids and say, here's what I went through, here's what my dad did good, here's what my dad didn't do good, right? Because it's not always easy to keep your cool, and every recording is not this perfect parent that is saying the right things all the time. And you have to understand, as a parent, you're going to make mistakes like that. Pull
Yeah.
yourself back, look at your future and say, how can I make that better later? So maybe at some point in the future we'll release some of those. But as parents, if your kids are going through that, turn your phone on, keep it in your pocket, just like record, just so you get the sound. And and if you're the only parent in the room, it really helps too. I would take that recording out to my wife and say, listen to this. And a lot of times it was like 30 minutes of her yelling at me and then 5 minutes of a conversation. But we would sort of critique ourselves and say, and my wife was really good at teaching me what I was doing wrong. That sounds bad, but she is
No, that sounds
brilliant.
amazing.
She's brilliant when it comes to parenting, and I am not. I'm still learning, and she'll look at that from a different perspective and say, here's how you could have done something different. And my wife also has anxiety, and she has depression, and Lucy has anxiety and depression. So she's like, I'm telling you, this is how she feels. You can say whatever you want about it, but I've been there. I understand it. This is how she feels. So this is how you should treat the situation next time. So use it as like a parenting, coaching back and forth as well.
No, this is
But
great. It's
yeah.
like when you get your homework back from your teacher and she's graded your paper, or like
Yep.
you're reviewing the game day tapes, or this is actually like a few things about a brilliant idea. Two, I think it speaks volumes about your marriage that you two are willing to look back on the mess and talk about it and grow
Yeah.
from it. A lot of couples can't do that
Yeah.
because it's revealing that I'm insufficient, I'm not enough, and it's confronting the fact that we don't know the answers. And as parents, that can be very uncomfortable as a parent and as a spouse, right? And two, that as a husband, that like I think it's less common than it was in our parents' age, but to rely on our spouses as a true partner
Yeah.
and leveraging the strengths that they bring to the marriage. Like I just applaud you and your wife. Like I think that's just amazing. That's no doubt that you guys have a gift that brought you to this moment. And thank you for. I know we're not done yet, but thank you for
Yeah. Absolutely.
having the courage to bring that to everybody. So let's
Yeah.
role play.
Okay.
So let's start with the precursor. We're going to decide ahead of time,
Okay.
and then we'll just go through the different stages, and then I'll throw a fit.
Okay.
Yes, I get to throw a fit. I've always wanted to. Okay. All right. Cool. So, what's a common scenario that we would be in to set the decision, make the decision ahead of time? Maybe like I'm in my bedroom, or we're just over dinner,
Yeah.
or what?
Yeah. So we're going to, let's say that we're going to go somewhere, maybe to like a neighborhood Christmas party. It's Christmas, right? So we're going to go to a
Okay.
neighborhood Christmas party.
Okay. I'm in the back of
And
the car and we're driving.
so here's where it starts before this. So it starts
Okay.
before
Okay.
you drive. So what
Okay.
we learned with Lucy is that she doesn't like surprises. If we give her enough advance to think about it, then work through it, then she can be okay with it. But if we're at the house and we're like, oh, forgot to tell you guys, we're going to go to the Christmas party tonight, then she'll be like, I'm not going. That's where the fit would start before we even got in the car.
She's
Yeah.
like executive authorization override. Like,
Yeah. You didn't tell me soon enough. I'm not going. I
Okay.
don't like people, whatever, right? So that's where the fit usually starts.
So I think with every kid it might be different. It might be a day in advance. It might be a week in advance. We don't need to know Lucy's time, but we're at that advanced time, and you're sitting me down and you're saying, "What?
Yeah, so she'll start throwing a fit and she'll be like, "I'm not going. You can't make me go." She'll run
I'm not going,
upstairs.
Dad. Nope, we're not doing this. I hate these parties. They stress me out. No one likes me. What if this happens? What if that happens? No, 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 no. I'm out. Peace.
Right?
Upstairs.
So those are valid concerns. What if this happens? What if that happens? So you're 12 years old now, and when in your 12-year period has any of those concerns ever happened to you?
Uh, 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 um,
Yeah, they haven't,
uh,
right? So
no, okay, they haven't. No.
So, and I understand that I apologize. We didn't let you know in advance that we were gonna go to this. We weren't sure if we were gonna go, but we decided tonight that we were gonna go. So I'm sorry about that. Um, do you remember the last party that we went to where you met one of your best friends? You never would have met your best friend if we wouldn't have gone through that party. Even though it was hard for you to go, you ended up going, right? So what's to
Yeah.
say that you won't find somebody just as special at this party, and have a good time in this party?
You think I can meet someone like Sally?
I think it's very possible. It's a new neighborhood that we're in. It's a new party, and I think it would be good for you to find some more friends. And you've been talking about wanting to find more friends that are closer to us now that we've moved away from the other neighborhood.
But what if they don't like me?
Oh, everyone likes you. Come on. there's there's not going to be anyone who doesn't like you. Tell me about the party. Let's walk through the party in your mind. Tell me what you think at the party could potentially happen.
Well, we drive there, and I don't know what's gonna happen. So I'm trying to figure out what's gonna happen. And I get there, we walk in the door, and I look around, and I'm trying to see where the people are at. I'm trying to see where our kids, like who can I talk to or who can I play with. And I look for food because I like food. And I look for the scary people so I can stay away from the scary looking people or the smelly people. And then I'm probably going to hold your hand because I'm nervous.
Yep, and that's okay.
And then um, I want someone to approach me because I'm afraid of that someone might not want to talk back to me. So I hope that somebody will talk to me. And then if I talk to someone, then I'll probably feel pretty good.
Okay. So if you can find somebody to talk to, you'll feel pretty good. So what if we took this one step at a time and said, okay, let's not worry about the party. Let's worry about getting in the car one step at a time. So we get in the car
Okay.
and we'll drive. You're
Okay.
worried maybe there might be an accident. In your 12 years of being alive, we've never been in an accident, so there's probably a small chance of that happening, right? So let's drive. Okay, so now we're at the neighborhood party and we walk
Okay.
inside. Okay, so I know you're usually afraid of Santa Claus. So tell you what, you don't have to go up on up and see Santa Claus. You can just stay
Thank you. Thank
stay
you.
with us. If you change your mind when you get there, that's fine. You can go
The smelly
talk to
breath.
him.
Thank you.
So the first thing you said that you really like about parties is the food. So how about we find a seat and then we go get the food. And then together we'll look around and we'll look at each of the tables and say that person looks about your age, that person looks about your age. And then after the food, we can plan a strategy on how we can get to know those people. We don't have to think about it now. We don't have to think about it in the car. We don't have to think about it while we're eating. Let's do those steps first. And
Okay.
then if you find a friend, great. If not, we had a good dinner, which you love good dinners, and we can come home after that. No stress. But if you do find a friend, that's gravy on top. That's better. That'll be a lot of fun moving forward, right? So, what do you think? Should we just jump in the car and start with that?
Okay. Let's do it. All right. So I love that role play because
Yeah.
one, you didn't promise her an outcome, or you didn't
Yeah.
promise me an outcome. I'm Lucy.
Right.
You didn't promise
Yeah.
me an outcome. You promised me what I can control, not what I can't
Yeah.
control. I love that
And
because
focus
I
on
think
the things
sometimes
that she
parents
does like.
promise, "Oh, you'll make a friend, I promise you," and then they don't, and then you're like, You
Yeah.
suck as a parent.
You
You
lied to
lied to
me.
me.
Yeah. We're not going to make new friends. That'd be great if we did. The last party we went to, you found a good friend. So it's possible. And I'm not going to force you to go talk to Santa. It's a Christmas party. If you want to, you can, but you can make that decision later. And the thing that you really like about parties is food. So we're going to focus on that. Just one step at a time. So a lot of times getting her to school was, let's not even worry about school. Let's just get out of bed and get some food. Because a lot of times if she hadn't eaten, the anxiety was a lot higher too. And so I said, I don't care about anything else in the future. All I want right now is let's go downstairs and eat some breakfast. So one step at a time really helped with her as well.
The other thing I think you did well is you flipped the script on the what if. Instead of you allowed the what if scenarios to still play out, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what if you make an amazing friend? What if you have fun? What if you have so
Yeah.
you changed the tone of what's at the end of that question.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of practice. Like I'm still not perfect. She still throws fits, but my wife and I have been going through this for many years, and it works for the majority of our kids too, not just anxiety.
Yeah.
The next book that we're writing, I don't know if we mentioned this, but we're going to write a series of 4 at least, and each of them are going to be around some scenarios with our kids. The next one is around anger management, and it's our boy, and he is in this like just throwing a major fit about everything. And we use a lot of the same things to help calm him down. So it works with all kids and maybe not just specific to anxiety. Um, and
But
it
it
does take
allowed
practice.
the different stories allow the kids to connect differently to the different
Yeah.
characters and people. I like
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're at the Christmas party.
Okay.
And we arrive. We get out of the car. We're walking up. No,
So she's
no,
constantly
no,
on my
no.
arms.
I can't do this. Like this is not going to be good. I know that someone's going to want to come up and touch my face. Like, can I just go sit in the car and just watch YouTube? Can I please just sit in the car and watch YouTube? I don't
But
want to do this anymore.
yeah. So in this scenario, a lot of times what would happen is I would take in the 3 other kids and my wife would sit out with her because with everybody watching her, she gets really nervous. When we try to calm her down and everybody's there, she gets really nervous.
Okay.
And so my wife would sit with her in the car and she would talk through some of the scary things and similar to what I would do, what we just practiced in the beginning, but she would walk through and say, tell me about it. Tell me what you're worried about. Tell me, you know,
So we do it
what
again. We do it again.
Yep, we do it again. And a lot of times if she's throwing a fit, one of the best exercises my wife used, I like to use the breathing exercises. One that my wife used when she was in the car with Lucy and Lucy was throwing her fit and I took the kids in to the party. She would have her focus on something. She goes, "Okay, let's not even worry about the party. Let's close your eyes. Tell me what sounds you hear." And she would close her eyes and she would say, "I hear a bird." She says, "Okay, focus on that bird. Imagine what it looks like. What color is it?" And she goes, "It's probably black or it's a robin." "Okay, what smells?" She smell things. "I smell McDonald's from last night that's still in the car," whatever it was, right? Um, and then she would open her eyes and say, "What do you see?" And she would focus on things. So there was like all of the senses
A lot of
that she
mindfulness.
Yep,
A lot
and
of
when she would
mindfulness.
focus on one thing, a sound or a smell or something else, it switched the fit and it calmed her down. And then after calming her down, then she would go through the exact same scenarios and say, "Tell me what you're worried about. Okay, if this happens, here's how I can help it. You're welcome to sit at the table right next to me and dad, right in between me and dad. You don't have to do anything else but eat. Should we start there?" And then after that, if we feel like we want to walk around and talk to people, I can help start those conversations. You don't have to. I can walk to the table while you sit at this table. I'll get to know the family and say, "I have a daughter. Do you want to come and meet her?" And I'll bring her to you. You don't have to do any of the work. And if you like that, we can do it. If you don't like that, we can just sit at the table. We can eat our food and we can just go home. And that would usually be enough to get her out of the car. She would be like holding on to an arm, and she has her comfort things where she has like a blanket and a teddy bear that she carries around. And so when we're not at the table, she has those to sort of give her comfort. um and so So that would be the next scenario, and then we would get her into the party, and that would usually work. We tag team. So if I did the first part, my wife would do the second. If she did the first part, I'd do the second. And it wasn't
Is
always
that
like
on
an
is
exact
that on
science,
purpose?
but
Is
no,
that on
it
purpose?
it depended on what she needed, and a lot of times I I get more frustrated faster, and so I'd be like, "We already talked about this. Let's just go in." And my
So
wife would
she
be like,
senses that energy and it feeds the anxiety.
"Yep." And so my wife would see that, and she would be like, "Why don't you take the other kids in, and I'll stay here with Lucy, and then I'll bring Lucy in." And usually 5 minutes or less, they were in, and then I would apologize, and we'd go on with the night. Yep. But sometimes the more masculine part of me helped it snap her out of it. But if she was going into a spiral, it it immediately escalated it and made it worse. And so a lot of times I had to step away from the situation. And if I was in the same room and it was just me and her, I would just ignore her for a little while. If my wife was able to switch places with me, then I would step away and my wife would come in.
Nice. All right. So once we're in there, what am I? What's happening?
So a lot of times we're just eating and she'll
She's
go
still
and get her
holding on.
food with us. She's not holding on to us anymore at this point. She'll go and she'll get her food and then she'll sit down, but then she'll look around and kind of see like, oh, nobody actually cares that I'm here, right? She'll like look around and not everybody is focused on her, which is what she thinks is going to happen, and that's going to be very embarrassing. And then something's going to happen that's going to make it even worse, and that's it. It almost never happens that way. And so she gets in and sees that there are no threats. And then Santa Claus comes in, and half of my kids are like, I want to go stand in line. And she's like, I don't want to. I'm like, okay, you can just stay here with us. And that's totally fine. Um, the other kids go up with the Santa. And a lot of times when that was happening was when the kids would start walking around and like, hey, you want to come play with us over here? Or, what are you doing? What's the name of your teddy bear and stuff like that. And a lot of times we've been blessed to live in really good communities where when we go to parties like this, those kids see her and they just come and love on her. And she loves that. She makes really good friends really fast, but they sort of have to initiate the first time. And we've been very fortunate to have, just like Lucy's friend in the book, um, we've been very fortunate to have really good kids that have seen her and together as a group come and loved on her, which makes her feel really special.
That's incredible. All right. So let's pretend that in this scenario, I snap. Like something doesn't happen. Maybe the food's gross. And so where maybe I was hoping that the food would calm me. It was just gross and I didn't want it. So now like my first stage of having something to hold on to has been disrupted
Yeah.
and I kind of throw a little fit. I'm like, let's leave. I'm leaving. I'm leaving. I'm leaving. And then the whole thing plays out. Like we won't talk about all the different scenarios, but now we're home.
Mm-hmm.
How do we role play that? How do we now that we're home, we're doing kind of the post mortem, which sounds really weird to say about like a family relationship. Let's do a post
Yeah.
mortem one, but we do the follow up discussion. What does that feel like?
So, so if she throws a fit right at the end, there's the compromise phase that we go through where it's like, okay, I understand that you're still nervous, you still don't want to be here. How about we let your siblings see Santa, and right after that we'll go home, right? So it's not like just because you want to leave right now, I'm not going to ruin the night for the rest of the kids. So we make this compromise, and she says, okay, because then she sees the light at the end of the tunnel. She's like, I know at least we're going home before it's over and I don't have to worry about this. So then we get home, and we don't go through postmortem until she is calm, right? If
Right,
she's still
right.
throwing a fit, it doesn't matter. So usually it's she's getting ready for bed, and some of the other kids are in a different room, and my wife and I will walk up to her. I actually did this just the other night with her. She was up on her bunk bed, and I just went and talked to her, and I said, "Tell me about today. Tell me about tonight. What happened? How did you feel? Did the things you think were going to happen?" And she would walk through it and say, "No, but I just don't think that I'm good enough to have friends. And I would talk through, well, why do you feel that way? Well, my sister said that I was dumb. I'm like, okay, that's a natural reaction for a sibling to say something like that. That was not okay of her to say, and I'll talk to her about that later. But you're not dumb, and that you make friends a lot. Think about all of these friends that you have. They all love you, and you had to meet them at some point, right? We moved into a new house 5 years ago. You met them the same way that you're meeting new people now. So walk me through how you felt. And a lot of times I'll flip it on her and I'll say, how would you as a parent want me to treat you differently in a scenario like that? And sometimes we'll role play that with other kids too. And she'll be like, give them everything they want. And then I'm like, okay, so they want this, then they go do here's what happens. And I walk through, I'm going to give them this is what they're going to do. And she goes, well, they can't do that. I'm like, okay, so you're going to give them the first thing but not the second thing. They're going to throw a fit. Okay, so what should we do? We should just punish them. I said, okay, how should we punish them? And she'll walk through what she thinks. And a lot of times she'll be like, oh yeah, I guess it's not really that easy, because if I had one kid, it would be easy. But I have 4 kids. So I have to work through your anxiety and his anger and her whatever, right? And so she sees now that as a parent, we were trying to help her and allow the kids to have a good night. And so she's laying in bed. It's at this point where she's always like, I'm so sorry for tonight. I was really scared and I didn't mean to ruin the night for everyone. And she'll be really apologetic. So that's when we'll go through those scenarios and say, okay, so next time this happens, next time we go to a party, I'll do my part and I'll tell you before. I'll give you a day's notice. As soon as I know about it, I'll tell you the party's going to happen so you can get ready. She says, okay, that will help. And then we'll talk about what the party's going to be. There's going to be food. There's going to be entertainment. There's going to be whatever it is. I'll let you know so that you can start thinking through that scenario. What are you going to do different the next time we go to the party so that all of us, your siblings and yourself, can enjoy your time there? And she'll think about it and she'll kind of go through it. So then the next time we have this party, I say, remember when we talked about this, you said that this is how you would do things differently, right? So let's try to do that tonight. And she'll be like, yeah, because it's her idea. Now it's not dad saying, you did this to me or you're making me do this. It's her remembering these are the ideas that she said she was going to do. So she has no choice but to get on board because it was her idea, and her ideas are always right and they're always good in her mind, right? So I sort of flip that. And then, yeah, that's usually how the postmortem goes.
This is awesome. When you're describing a lot of this, and a lot of things come to my mind. Do you know who Chris Voss is? He's like
The name sounds really familiar.
he like teaches negotiation tactics. He's a former FBI negotiator,
Yeah.
and he now teaches businesses how to negotiate, like whether it be like
Nice.
employee contracts or whatever.
Yeah.
And in a lot of his classes, he talks about like uh, he uses different words, but like a lot of the same tactics you're describing. So I thought,
Yeah.
oh, working with a kid with anxiety is a lot like negotiating the hostage out of a bank. This is awesome. All right,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I will.
This is
I will give credit.
probably what it felt like to you at many times, I'm sure.
It does, and I'll give credit to like my professional experience and having a team of, I had 45 people on my last team at my last job, and going through every personality was somewhat difficult. And so a lot of what I learned at home I would use with them, and a lot of what I use with them I would bring home. And so there were sales tactics, and there was different things that I would use from work to help convince her of whatever she needed to be convinced. So
That's
it is kind of
awesome.
along those same lines. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to spell a lot of this out. I'm sure that we could probably go for hours. I mean, you spent so many years in this, and I think it's really nice for parents and probably grandparents too to
Mhm.
hear what others have done who've been down that path. You've been down that path, you're still on it, but you've been down it far enough that what you're offering is great for those following behind you, right?
Mhm.
So thank you. And so I just want to remind people, normally we don't do like like product pitches and stuff, but I feel like this is so important. I don't know anything else like this. So Lucy Tames Her Tiger, people can buy it on Amazon.
Yep, they can buy it on Amazon, or we have a website called Mental Health Books for Kids.
Okay.
Mental Health Books for Kids, just so I spell it out.
All
It's
right.
actually in the right under my name here.
Yeah.
But they can buy it there, and that's also where they can find the next ones that are coming out.
Awesome. Hey, thanks again so much, and really appreciated you being here.
Yeah,
And I look forward to hearing more about the books coming up. It's going to be awesome,
yeah.
I'm sure. All
Thanks so
right.
much for the opportunity, James. Appreciate it.
Thank you.